There's also work being done now in the area of the effects of globalization on software development. And in fact, one of our customers, the one I mentioned that has the unit in India that's going to be producing the products, but will also end up producing some of the core assets as well. There are issues here associated with the management and the level of communication that you can support between these organizations, not only in terms of server bandwidth, but just the time difference and the cultural changes of operating in many different countries. There is some work being done at Carnegie Mellon in the area of globalization of software architecture. I don't know that has been adapted for the needs of a software product line yet. But you can imagine that with this move towards globalization, there are organizational structures like the ones that I showed you, but with units in different countries, not just different parts of the organization. So there's a scaling up of the kinds of challenges that you would encounter in managing those distributed organizations. There are also organizations adopting an open source philosophy within the organization. So it's not open source in the sense that they're going outside of the organization, but within the organization they are giving developers of products and developers of core assets a greater say in the overall product line. And it's a good way of getting the participation of people and making people buy into the product line approach and socializing this whole idea of software product lines, so that it's not just an edict that says, okay, you're all core asset developers, you're all product developers, you guys will take what these people produce and you will like it and you will create products from it. With a more open source approach, you have much more visibility into what's going on within these different groups and a greater sharing of information and a greater sharing of lessons learned across the organization about the adoption of the overall product line approach. And one of our customers is doing that and has set up a wiki for sharing information across the organization. Some of the risks, first of all, assuming that the structure you have chosen at the beginning of the product line effort is the one that's going to persist for the entire life of the product line effort. Not soliciting feedback and not soliciting ways to improve the organization and the organizational structure. And if organizations do this as, well, it's been 6 months since we last had a reorg, now we're going to reorg around software product lines, then it becomes, this is the reorg of the month, so why should we, as the rank and file, trust that this is going to be any better than the previous attempts at reorganizing? Other things to note are existing organizational stress, like, for example, today's economy. Or like, for example, the fact that one of our customers, one of our DoD customers is on a base that's slated for closing. If you have an implementation history of ineffective organizational change, what makes you think that this one is going to be any better? Just because you've structured around core asset development and product development. And then things like resistance management, sponsorship, culture, change agent skills. These are all things that aren't directly addressed in the framework, but that play a role in the success of a product line. And there's probably plenty of literature outside the product lines arena dealing with this kind of thing, because these are not just product line specific risks. And then finally, there's the whole idea of, we've created a new org chart that shows what the new organization is going to look like, but we've no idea what the boxes and lines mean on that org chart. We haven't come up with an operational concept. We don't understand the roles and responsibilities for each of these boxes. We simply have designated somebody to be the product line manager, somebody to be the product line architect, but we don't really know what those roles mean. You might think that organizations would not do this. Let me tell you, they do, more often than we'd like. They make a decision to become a product line organization. They throw out these terms like core asset developer and product line architect. They've no real idea of the implications of those terms, and they've no real idea of the responsibilities that go along with those, and how those responsibilities relate to the responsibilities of other people within the product line organization. So an org chart without an accompanying concept of operations is at best a cartoon. Some reading on this, the reference for Bosch is either his book or a paper that he wrote based on the chapter of the book that deals with organizational structure. The Brown Sword reference is actually the Celsius Tech case study, which has a lot of information about how Celsius Tech changed its structure over the years as the Ship System 2000 product line evolved. And the last one is Ivar Jakobsen's book on the reuse-driven software engineering business. In the interests of time, I am not going to discuss these particular questions. Any questions on organizational structure that you might have before we move into the business case?
Yeah, I had a question on your first question. Going back to your definitions.
Definitions.
Core asset. Is a core asset executable on its own? It seems to be implied that it's not meant to, but it's not limited to.
It's not necessarily, but it's not limited.
Which would affect the testing question.
Yes.
If they're just going to static test it, yeah. If it's going to be dynamically tested and it's not meant to be a standalone,
then there are implications for testing. And there's a whole other practice area in the framework that we don't get into here that deals with testing.
Because the components could be standalone, but not necessarily.
But not necessarily, yes.